the translators. As the turmoil of an agitated world surges about them, the supporters of Baha'u'llah's majestically rising faith must, as the beloved guardian so clearly indicated, scale nobler heights of heroism, serenely confident that the hour of their mightiest exertions must coincide with the lowest ebb of mankind's fast declining fortunes. So as the world gets worse and worse, our heroism and our exertions have to reach their peak. And the House of Justice has said we've entered the darkest hour before the dawn. So you know what the appeal is now for what we need. And there's lots of things going on in our lives and we can't help but be distracted, but the House of Justice really encouraged us not to be perturbed for even one moment. Even Abdu'l-Baha said, be patient and composed. Blessed Beauty, in one tablet, he said, if, however, for a few days in compliance with God's all-encompassing wisdom, outward affairs should run their course contrary to one's cherished desire, this is of no consequence and should not matter. That's number 14 for the translators. You know, I want to tell you, before moving to Haifa, I was living in the United States, and I used to come home, my wife and I would come home at the end of the day, and she would say, so how was your day today? And I said, well, to quote Baha'u'llah, today outward affairs ran their course contrary to my cherished desire. But she knew this quote better than I did, and she said, but remember, at the end he says, this is of no consequence and should not matter. Baha'u'llah goes on to say, our intent is that all the friends should fix their gaze on the supreme horizon and cling to that which hath been revealed in the tablets. You know, yesterday I was driving up to the house of worship with Stefan, and we were going quite fast. Really, actually quite fast. It reminded me of when before the first conference in Zambia, I was driving also with a guy that was driving pretty fast, and we were going along in this highway in Zambia, and there were markets all along the road, you know, selling vegetables and so on. And he got a cell phone call from his wife, and she said, pick up some potatoes on the way home, all right? So he turned to me and he said, look for potatoes. So he's really driving fast, like Stefan. And he's just zooming, and the markets are flying by, you know, and I'm looking out the window and they're just a blur, you know. I can see the watermelons, okay? And the tomatoes were red, I could tell that, okay. But I was looking for potatoes, and I was just, and then eventually I was getting nauseated because it was a blur, you know. And I was thinking about how, but then what I noticed that when I looked up, you know, when I looked up at the road ahead, at the horizon, everything came into focus. There was a serenity, no matter how fast the guy was driving. And I was thinking about how Baha'u'llah said, you know, there's lots of stuff happening in your life, because we all have a situation, right? Or two or three in our lives. Right? And there's all those things happening in the news, and we're just, the world situation, the House is writing more and more about it and telling us not to be perturbed, not to be distracted by it and so on. But we can't help it sometimes, and it's just a blur. And if we focus on it, we just get sick. But Baha'u'llah said, fix your gaze on the supreme horizon and cling to that which hath been revealed in the tablets. Because when we focus on what the head of the faith wants us to do, and what Baha'u'llah has written about developing our character and serving the world, everything comes into focus. There's a serenity. No matter what's happening in the world, There's a serenity and a calmness about what we're doing. Baha'u'llah said, our affairs are different than the affairs of men. Really. Not to be perturbed for even a moment. House of Justice, in the letter to this conference, said, press on then with a joyful spirit. Remember, if we're confused about what we're to do for the faith at this time, or what we're to do in our life with our family and our jobs or school or whatever it is, think of the wisdom of this, what the house said, press on with a joyful spirit. Abdu'l-Baha, when he was in Paris, he said, joy gives us wings. In times of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect is keener, our understanding is less clouded, we seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness. Of course the house asks us to press on with a joyful spirit. We have to be happy now. We can't be distracted. Our affairs are at variance, Baha'u'llah said, with the affairs of men. And if you feel inadequate, well, of course you do. Of course you do. I mean, look at, this is what Baha'u'llah's pulled together, you know? This is it. You remember the Blessed Bab, when he was in Isfahan with Manachir Khan, the governor, remember, took him in? Manachir Khan, the wonderful governor that fell in love with the Bab and the teachings of the Blessed Bab. And he said, I had this dream and I have an idea. We're going to take all my money and my army and we're going to, remember book 4? We were going to march into Tehran because the king is a friend of mine, and we'll convince him, and we'll, together with his money and his army and my army, then we'll march into Europe, and one by one, you know. And the Bab, Blessed Bab, said that because his heart was pure, it was accepted. In the spiritual world, his offer, but that's not how the faith is going to progress. Not through money and power and armies. Even Baha'u'llah offered this to the kings and the rulers, and no one responded. So he said, I'm taking power away from them. Power to change the world is with us. Amidst the seething masses of humanity, we are in this day God's chosen instruments.